Hello and welcome. This is the Baker Senior Show, where we talk about all the things that are important to you when it comes to Medicare and some of the senior resources that we have for you. Today is a very special day where Mr. Baker is going to be explaining to us a little bit more about the resources for people who really don't have a lot of money. Sometimes Medicare can be very confusing, and we're going to clear up some of the terms that we use, like Medicaid versus Medicare, things like that. So good morning, Mr. Baker. How are you?
Doing great. Ready to go.
Good. Well, thank you for bringing all this great information to us about Medicare. I know how confusing it can be. From getting postcards and phone calls and your neighbors and people, trying to talk to you about it, they think they know what's best for you. And in reality, Steve, that may not be true.
Correct.
So, Steve, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what it is that you do for people?
Well, what I do is I evaluate someone's situation, and people call me all the time, and they're in different areas. I had a call just a couple of days ago from a lady about her mother, and her mother was born in 1946. So if you can do the math, which I've done, people born this year are eligible for Medicare if they were born. I'm sorry, not born this year.
Yeah, but I was going to say, now wait a minute.
if they were born in 1955, then they're turning 65 this year. Next year it'll be 56 and so forth. So I keep up with that. And so she told me that her mother was born in 1946. And I'm doing the math, and I'm going, oh wow, she's really never enrolled in Medicare, so that's going to create some major issues right there. And I explained to her in a cursory way some of the things that can happen because she's been delayed, or she delayed filing, and I even brought up that awful word penalty, which Medicare has penalties if you don't act just right, and it's part of it's a government program, so they tend to penalize people if they don't do certain things at a certain time. So
okay, wait a minute now, Steve, because I remember you telling me early on that when you turn 65, you're automatically enrolled in Medicare, and
that's A. There's two parts. They're automatically enrolled in A. She's been automatically enrolled in A because her birthday way back, she doesn't have the documentation for that, but that's the case. And then to complicate things, her mother has lived in Brazil for periods of time, in and out and so forth, and that creates an issue. So I explained to her what her situation was, and she really doesn't have income to speak of. She has a little bit of Social Security. That's it. So she was in a panic. So she wanted to know what to do. And I just said, well, calm down. And we'll talk about
Calm down.
Calm down. Exactly. We'll talk about her situation. So we did. And she's on, she doesn't have she probably, from what she told me, she probably qualifies for Medicaid.
Okay, there's where those two words that sound similar are totally different. Medicare versus Medicaid.
Exactly.
Okay, so today we're talking about resources for people who don't make much money or who have some problems with their finances.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that this person that you spoke with yesterday, at least the family member, is trying to tell you that she has no resources,
mm-hmm.
and she never applied for the Medicare that she should have.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So right away, I knew that she had to be, as there are two parts of Medicare: the traditional Medicare with, with a supplement, and then the other is the Medicare Advantage program. Medicare Advantage program is the Mr. and Mrs. Catch-all of Medicare. Typically, if someone doesn't fit into the first category because of the lack of resources and other reasons as well, then there's usually, almost always, there is a Medicare Advantage program where they can slip into, where they can fit into. And in her case, I told her that your mother needs to become what we call a dual. By dual, she's eligible for Medicare because she's way over 65, and there's going to be some major complications there. But she's also can get available Medicaid, which is different. And I think I've talked about this before, but just to explain that Medicare is the program that was created in 1965 for Americans, older Americans in their senior years, 65 and above. And so that's quite a comprehensive definition. But then there's Medicaid. I'm sorry. Yeah, you got Medicare, and then you've got Medicaid. But also you can also go into the Medicare Advantage program. Both of them still in the Medicare area. So one of the areas in the Medicare area, in Medicare Advantage area, is duals. What we nickname them duals because they're eligible for Medicare and Medicaid, and that puts them into a category. If they're actually in Medicaid and have Medicare, then they're what we call a dual, and you can be put into a category of Medicare Advantage called a dual eligible. So if someone is dual eligible, that means that they can slip in and get Medicare at almost zero cost. And there's some reasons for that. I won't go into a lot of details, but there is that category of Medicare Advantage that people can jump into. So this person needs to apply for Medicaid. She doesn't have Medicaid. So she said, well, how do I do that? And one way that you can try right away is to call 211 in the phone system, and then you'll be connected with someone eventually. Nowadays, it's a big, long wait. You have to stay on the line a long, long time. And I warned her about that. So I haven't heard back from her, but that'll start the process going for her to apply for Medicaid.
Okay, so if you want to apply for Medicaid, you call 211?
Uh-huh. Right.
Do you call 211 for anything else?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
That's what it's for. That's what it's for. It simplifies it. And then it complicates it too, because then you're having to wait and more. As this program is being made, we're right in the middle of what we call COVID-19. So that even more it creates issues because all the Social Security offices are closed as we speak right now. That doesn't mean that in 2 weeks or 1 month from right now will be open, but right now they're closed. So you have to just wait on the line and keep calling back and so forth. Now, the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, one of the major issues is that Medicare is a federal program that's available to everyone who turns 65 in the United States. So once it's determined that you turned 65, you can talk about the two programs. So Medicare is, like, for example, I have Medicare, and I'm not in the Medicare. Personally, I'm not in the Medicare Advantage program, but I do help a lot of people with that. And then the other side of that is the Medicare Advantage program. Now, Medicaid is a state program. The federal government gives states what they call block grants. In other words, they have a certain amount of money. Sometimes it's way up into the billions of dollars in order to provide needs for people of low income. And each state is a little bit different. Each state sets their regulations for Medicaid. So if you live in North Dakota, as an example, as opposed to Louisiana, then the process will be different. The regulations will be different. So whatever state you reside in, you have to adhere to those regulations. And I understand, I'm almost positive that the 211 will apply everywhere across the board. So so you can start the process by calling 211, and then have a lot of patience. And I warned this person about that. Have a lot of patience, and eventually you'll get taken care of, and you can apply for Medicaid. There are some income restrictions. You don't want to make too much money. Sometimes if people are fortunate enough to have a nice size social security check coming in, sometimes that will throw someone out of the arena, and sometimes not. So and again, it depends on what state you're in and so forth.
So Medicaid is for people who have no money. They're not working. They're over 65.
Mhm.
They're really they can't even afford to pay for a supplement, and they're really kind of out of resources. Basically, that's where you would try to at least see if you qualify for Medicaid. Now, what
Correct.
does Medicaid do for someone?
Well, what it does basically is it creates your eligibility for health care. And a lot of people thinks, because of the name and the way way people perceive it, they call it Medicaid. And I warn people, it's not necessarily so. It's almost never so. That means I can get money, right? No, that means you're gonna get some health care, because the Medicare program is for getting health care. Social Security is for getting resources on a monthly basis, but Medicaid is to get health care.
Okay.
So if they're eligible for both of them, then they become what we call duals.
Okay, that's good. So
people need to understand that you're not gonna get money out of it. You're going to get your health care taken care of, which would include your prescriptions as well.
Right. So, in my opinion, if somebody wasn't sure, they should probably call you first to get on the Right Medicare, and to get advice on whether they should apply for Medicaid, and talk about because there's so many different ways to look at what you're going to need. Prescriptions, doctors, as you and I have discussed before in some of our previous episodes, that there's certain circumstances where you might need a doctor to come visit you that you can't get out. So there are programs, as you found one for my friend who's living in a personal care home now. You found for her the right program where a doctor could come in and see her. She didn't have to go back out.
Right.
Which is amazing. I wouldn't have known any of that.
Sure.
I didn't know that we even had a choice. So I think the first thing for you to do, if you have any questions at all, is to call Steve Baker at 832-754-3292, just to get an idea of what you should be looking out for, and to see what you qualify for.
Right.
Steve, you're so knowledgeable. You have so many different stories of people that you have helped along the way. And you also have some sad stories of people that didn't follow your advice, or came to you too late, or or whatever. So I'm encouraging anyone listening to this to just pick up the phone. Steve's very kind, he's very nice, very knowledgeable, and he'll help you steer you in the right direction if nothing else.
Sure. Right. Yeah. I'll be glad to explain. Of course, I'm an agent, but that doesn't mean that I would be interested in selling them anything because
Right,
I've
right.
been doing, yeah.
And also things like getting a copy of the Medicare and You book. All
Hmm.
they have to do is call you, and you can even give them that. So that's where I think everyone should start, is to at least call you on the phone to get an
Hmm.
idea of where they are.
Right.
So, we talk about all these different programs and all these different ways that Medicare and our government, Medicaid, all the different things that we talk about.
Hmm.
If you're still working, you have questions about, well, I turned 65, but I'm still working.
Right.
There's the HR department, there's so many different people that have their viewpoint of it. You see everything all together. You have a little bit of knowledge about everything.
Right. Yeah. So I can usually lead somebody in the right direction.
Right.
There's another area too that we don't talk about a whole lot, not enough probably, is 1-800 Medicare, and I can tell people about that and what to look for, what to expect when they call Medicare, and it's a little known area, and also not a lot of people know that for whatever reason, I have no idea, but Medicare, 1-800 Medicare is, the lines are open 24/7. So someone can call them, at any time of the day and night for questions.
And I
And
do have
the
that number
person,
up on the screen. It's 1-800-633-4227.
uh-huh.
And so if it's 3 a.m. and you have a question about Medicare, I bet you'd prefer them to call that number instead of you, right, Steve?
That would work. That would work. But I'm also available to be more specific about the products and so forth.
Right.
Medicare doesn't talk a lot about the products that are available for someone, but they are responsive to just general questions about Medicare in 1-800 Medicare, and it works very well for people. And a lot of times I refer people to that, and then I get back with them after they talk to the people at 1-800 Medicare, and those people are stationed all over the United States, so they can generally pick up pretty quickly. So,
Steve, there's one thing that we really haven't talked about much, and that is people who are disabled.
mhm.
What do you know about how Medicare and people who are on disability, how does
well,
that work?
there's a category for that as well, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but most of the time, a lot of the time, they would fit over in the category of the Medicare Advantage. Now, if someone is disabled and they're turning 65 and they have some resources, by some resources, I mean enough income to take care of a Medicare and a supplement, or another word for that is a Medigap policy. Medigap and Medicare supplement are exactly the same thing, kind of like an automobile and a car. It's the same thing, right?
Right.
So Medicare supplement and Medigap is the exact same program. If they have some resources, but they are disabled, understand? Say they're on a pension plan, they have, their retirement's taken care of, but they are disabled. Then that would fit in one category. If someone is disabled and they have little or no resources, then that puts them into another category, and I can explain the difference to them.
Okay.
So, So they, if they're in what we call open enrollment, if they're in an open enrollment period and they're getting ready to turn 65 or they've just turned 65, then they're eligible to go into just a Medicare and a supplement as well.
And Steve, what happens? A lot of times you hear about spouses that pass away, and the other spouse, the living spouse, gets their Social Security or something like that. Does that have anything to do with Medicare or any of the Medicaid or anything that we're talking about today?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with Medicare. That's a totally different animal over in the Social Security. But I will say this, not to confuse anyone, but say a
Too
husband
late.
and yeah, right. But it's say if a husband and wife are both receiving a Social Security, like for example, she worked and she has 40 quarters under her belt, then she can start receiving a Social Security check. And if the husband has worked all these years, then he gets his Social Security check. So they both are receiving Social Security, and typically his will be a larger amount than hers. But if you add the two together, it's reasonably good household income for them on a monthly basis. So if that happens, and one of them were to pass away, the surviving spouse can pick which one is larger. In other words, let's say he's getting $1,900 a month and she's getting $850 a month. If he passes away, she has the choice of taking his amount or her amount, but not both. I hope I clarified that a little bit.
Absolutely, but it has nothing to do with Medicare
It has nothing to do with Medicare
or Medicaid.
or Medicaid. Exactly.
Okay.
Nothing
So
whatsoever.
if a spouse has Medicare and the other spouse doesn't, it doesn't transfer over when the other person dies. They don't have a choice. Okay.
Everybody
All
has
right.
everybody has their individual program.
Their individual. Okay, gotcha. All right. I appreciate that.
Right.
Did we cover everything you wanted to cover about the disabilities?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I will say that maybe not this coming week, but in the near future, I'll go into a little more detail about things that could possibly be available to somebody on disability. And I didn't cover it today because there's just too much
Right. There is
to
a
cover.
lot. Yes,
Yes.
I understand that.
But we'll cover some other areas where they might be able to fit into. It just pays to talk with someone who knows, and I've been doing this many years, so I'm able to guide people in the right direction,
Right.
and at least point them in a direction where they can go and get even more detailed information.
Right. Steve, you had mentioned something about Medicare Savings programs and qualifying individual programs. Can you talk about that, and what is that? What does that
Well,
mean?
yeah, we probably don't have enough time right now to go into the Medicare Savings area, but that is something that somebody might possibly fit their needs. So for now, I'm just gonna talk about the two areas, Medicare and Medicaid is what we're really talking about right now.
Okay.
But there are some other things that could some people might be able to take advantage of.
Okay. What is it that we need to know that we haven't really understood yet about the Medicare, Medicaid opportunities? I'm going to say opportunities for healthcare.
Well, almost for sure, well, I'm going to say pretty much as long as someone is a citizen of the United States, then they can qualify for something. The 40 quarter things, that's 10 years of employment, not continuous necessarily, but 10 years of employment through their life. And if you divide that and add, you multiply it by 4, that's 40 quarters. So that's Social Security has those rules and so forth. And you can talk to someone at Social Security and quickly determine if you're eligible for Social Security. But to answer your question, there's differences over in the Medicare side. There's quite a bit that I could go into, the differences, but I'm not going to at this moment. But we will, in future editions of this program, we will cover a lot of those areas, taking them a little bite at a time,
Okay.
and talk about each one.
So I guess today we're really talking about if you don't feel like you have any resources, you should be able to call Steve and he can at least, give you because everybody's different. Everybody's situation's different. So he
Right.
can at least look at your situation, or if you're calling about a friend or a neighbor or a care giving situation, you can at least figure out where to start,
Right.
because it's very complicated.
Right.
It doesn't need to be so complicated because there are so many different opportunities. It just seems complicated if you
Right.
don't know, if you've never experienced it, if you don't know how to do it.
Right. And another thing I do is people are, not necessarily, on a lower income kind of thing, but people are working, let's say, and they're involved in a corporate world, and they take their income through they decided not to retire, let's say, and they turn 65. Then what do they do? And I'm helping a lot of people with that these days, because people are working past 65 and continuing on with their group program. And I help people make decisions in that area as well. And I'm doing more and more of that, because people are out there. And as a matter of fact, as we talk now, because of the pandemic, COVID-19 that we're in, there's been a lot of layoffs, particularly in the area where you and I live, in the oil and gas industry. There's a lot of turmoil there, and so I can help people there and lead them in the right directions as well for their
We
choices.
talk about how, you may be 65 and still working. Well, hello. They scared us to death about 10 years ago. They started talking about when people retire, they die within a year. So never retire, just keep working.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
That was like the big news, people that retire at age 65, they're dead within a year. I'm like, whoa, I never want to retire. But
Right.
we're just so much more lively now.
Yeah.
I'm 62. I don't feel like I'm going to retire anytime soon. Are you kidding? I
Mhm.
love working.
Yeah.
And of course, it makes me money, but it also keeps me engaged with
Right.
people, and
Uh-huh.
my church, and my friends, and my coworkers, and my clients. It's. I don't think that we need to retire at 65. So I'm sure you get a lot of calls, and a lot of people are interested in talking with you about what to do about their Medicare because they're not retiring.
Right. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I think you and the HR department of the company that they're working for need to talk and get a system in place where you can come out and tell them all about it.
Exactly.
There you
Exactly.
go.
And I'm
So,
doing I'm doing a lot of that nowadays.
so if you are working and you want Steve to come in and give a presentation, he'd be more than happy to do that. Just call the number that's on the screen right now, 832-754-3292. This has been a terrific show. Mr. Baker, I really appreciate you diving into all the different options that people have, especially the people who don't have a lot of resources. Do you have any last words before we close up for today?
No, just be knowledgeable. I mean, it's, just try to get someone to help you. I guess that's the real key. And it doesn't necessarily have to be me. It can be what we've talked about,
Mhm.
other resources as well. I can definitely point someone in the right direction for their situation.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Steve. And I'll see you. We're here live on Facebook and YouTube every Tuesday at 8 o'clock Central Time. So be sure and come in and let us know if you have any questions. You can always ask questions whether you're watching the replay or you're live here every Tuesday. So we'll see you again